We are live. Correct?
Yep.
We are live. Welcome, everybody, to the first day of the second session of the biennium. Today is Tuesday, January 6th. Welcome to members of the committee and to interested members of the public. We're starting off the session with an inquiry that we've asked some 20 witnesses, I would guess, to talk about. And the inquiry is not, I'll tell you what it's not. It's not what's wrong with housing. Or, what's the housing situation? Because we all know what the housing situation is. There's not enough of it. It's too expensive. It's hard to permit. It's hard to finance. We don't have enough money for subsidy. We know all that. What we asked people was specific to what we do here, which is we legislate. And the question we've asked people is, what of the legislation that we have passed so far has worked? What isn't working? Why? And what should we do? What direction should we go? And I've had a number of witnesses talk to me and say, can I talk about regulatory reform? Can I talk about, and I've said yes to everything. In other words, even if it isn't only the purview of our committee, I've said, let's hear it. And these hearings will go on this week and well into next, because some people aren't available. Really, the order of witnesses is a function more than anything of when are people available. We've asked pretty much all of the governmental major players. We've asked a number of representatives of nonprofit housing people. We've asked we have the state chamber, we're having the Northeast Kingdom chamber, we're asking tenants groups to testify. We're just trying to get an approach where we hear from everybody. And if any of you have ideas for people that we really need to hear that haven't already worked, who can offer something that hasn't been offered, tell us and we'll get them. We didn't include everybody. So for example, we have someone testifying from Champlain Housing Trust, representing those organizations. We didn't ask downstream to testify. In other words, we're doing it kind of by sector that way. Well, what we thought we'd do is start with our legislative council. And we've asked Cameron and Ellen Tchaikovsky to come in and talk about existing, what have we done? What is the existing law? Looking at what we did, Act 69 last year, and looking at the Home Act and 181, sort of where are we? So is there anything anyone would like to say before we start with Cameron?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add that those who have not been invited to speak as witness this week, it's just this week. I fully intend, I think we all intend that they will come knocking on our door if we don't ask them. So we want to hear everyone's voice. I think we were just trying to set up a pathway forward to really understanding where those specific 3 bills where the status is today. But before we obviously all know each other, but it might be beneficial for us to all introduce ourselves to Miriam, our new legislative assistant, and yeah.
Let's do that. Let's do that. And let's start at your end of the table, Madame.
Representative Gail Pezzo, Colchester, District 20.
Mary
Go ahead. I just said welcome.
okay. Mary Howard, Rutland City, District 6. Nice to have you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Burrows. I represent Windsor 1, which is Heartland, West Windsor, Windsor.
Hi again, Rep. Lamont, Lamoille, Washington District.
Hello, Emily Krasnow, South Burlington, Chittenden 9.
Franklin won. Sorry.
You looked at me and I
I
got
don't know why.
nervous.
Where is she?
Hi, Leonora Dodge, use she, her pronouns, and I represent Essex Town, part of the city of Essex Junction, which is in the 23. Welcome.
Joe Parsons, it's nice to meet you.
Don Charlton again, Chester, Athens, Wyndham and Grafton.
And I'm Mark Mahaly from Callis and Washington 6, Callis, Plainfield, and Marshfield. And do you want to give us the, Debbie.
Debbie Dolkin, representing St. Johnsbury, Concord, and Kirby. Did
Thank
get
you,
me?
Debbie.
Okay.
And you want to give us a 1-minute version of you and where you're from and how you got here?
Hi, my name is Mary Mountford. I'm the committee assistant for y'all this year. I was entering here in 2024, decided to come back, here's some time in the Department of Labor. Tried to use they them pronouns if you're amenable, but I'm not stressed about it. And I live in Burlington.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So let us start with one of our esteemed legislative counsel, Cameron Wood. Cameron?
Good afternoon. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel, welcome back. I'm excited to be back, so I hope you all are excited as well. It's been a lot of work over the past few months, so it's nice to see everybody here in person and face to face. So happy to be here. I will take a quick moment to just say I worked with Miriam for a brief moment at the Department of Labor right before I left, and I think that you all are in great hands having them here. They're great. So here we go. I was asked to come in and just kind of briefly touch on some of the things that you all have enacted over the past 2 years. So I took a look at what passed in 2024 and Act 181, and then I'm just going to briefly go over what you all did last year and what became Act 69. So I'll pull up my screen and just, kind of share the sections at least, but I'll talk really high level, try to be succinct. I will also just comment that as I was kind of going through and preparing for this, there are some callbacks to a lot of programs that you all created in 2021, 22, and 23. Many of them one-time programs in the moment, some of which I think have kind of turned into permanent programs. But I'm simply starting this off by making that statement. I don't have the entire picture of everything that exists. In the time frame of just trying to get here and prepare with everything else going on, I wasn't able to go back and review some of those older pieces of legislation, but I'd be happy to pull together a list and provide to you all if that would be easy, of some of those one-time programs that were created over that time. So
I think that would be good after you finish all the bills you're working on.
as you know, sir, better than anyone, I still have drafting work to be done. So, okay. I'm going to share my screen and let's see if I'm rusty from the end of last session. Miriam, I just sent a request to share. Awesome. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do real quick was just point out that for those who are new and may not be aware, this is your second year. We wrap up every session, and then at the end of the session, the bills that you all pass, they have a House or a Senate number. When they're signed or they go into law, they're then given an act number. And then at that point, they get published on our website. And then our office actually has to go in and do an act summary for each of those pieces of legislation. So just for anyone outside of the public or members of the committee who may not be aware, you can go into the act itself. So for example, I just pulled up Act 181 from 2024. This is a 170 plus piece of page, 170 plus page piece of legislation. So there is a lot of information in here. Unfortunately, Ellen's the one who has to condense most of that down for you all. But I just wanted to highlight that when you go to Act 181, which was initially H 687, you can come here to the webpage, and there is here a link to an act summary that our office puts together. So you click on this, it's got very succinct 2 pages, kind of nonpartisan description of what the act does. So just, you know, for you all, if you want some reading on some of these acts, if we're not able to cover everything, you can go there. We obviously can provide you with some additional detail or written material if you'd like, but just pointing this out for those who, like I said, may not be aware. So that is that. I'm going to see if I have the same issue I ran into last year with sharing PDF files. Okay. So this is Act 181, 2024, as I just mentioned. Forgive me, I just want to make sure I get to the right page to begin with. Okay, I'm on page 138. So as I said, it's 171 pages. First, I believe 137 pages are primarily related to everything that you all did regarding land use and changes, you know, to land use processes, et cetera. So page 138 is where the housing program sections start. So that's where I will pick up. The first few pages here are some changes that you all made to the VHIP program. And so I won't kind of go line by line unless you all would like me to, or unless you want me to stop and kind of look at some specific language in particular. I will mention that you had some minor kind of administrative changes allowing the department to charge a reasonable cap up to 5% for administration, allowed the Department of Housing to cooperate with others to subgrant funds. The primary things that you all did this year for VHIP were you changed it here. This is under D1A. So it used to be, or at the time, it was that they could only get $50,000 per unit for rehab under VHIP. In 2024, you all expanded that up to $70,000. That additional $20,000 was supposed to go to in the event that they were bringing the unit up to the accessibility standards. And then there's another section in here where you authorized the individuals to use the funds to put in a parking space for an individual with a disability. So that was one of the key pieces that you all changed in 2024. You all also, so here's where in section 7, they can create a parking spot for an individual with a disability using the funds. In 2024 was where you also kind of created that distinction between the 5-year forgivable loans and the 10-year forgivable loans. So originally, as it was, if the individual received a grant, the individual had to lease the unit to somebody among a certain sublisted population, and you all expanded it in 2024. But someone exiting homelessness, you added that it could be for a youth through an organization that holds a master lease, an individual actively working with immigrant refugee resettlement program. Then you all added one individual with a disability who is eligible to receive Medicaid funded home and community-based services. So my point here is just in 2024, you expanded the populations of people who could be served slightly. And then that's where you put into effect the distinction between the 5-year grants and the 10-year forgivable loans. And if you all remember, you came back to this last year and addressed it, and I'll get to that in just a second. So that's primarily what you all did for VHIP. I'm going to pause because I feel like Rep. Dolgen may have checked in there.
Just to refresh everybody's memory, the VHIP program is a program administer out of DHCD where, well, that's where it originates, where funds are available to help rehabilitate individual rental units that aren't up to code now and or for dilapidated or whatever and can be turned into permanent housing, rental housing. And it's generally pretty cost effective. That's the interesting thing about it. The question is how long the affordability provisions are not permanent. They're either 5-year or 10-year, depending. So that's in summary what the VHIP program is. Yes.
It also, just to point out one problem that I have with VHIP is that it's a reimbursement. So
You gotta have the
goes,
money to
you have
start.
to have the money to start.
And in most cases, the rehabilitation costs more than the grant. The grant subsidy, is an additional subsidy, but it doesn't pay for all of it.
Okay, back to 181. So the next section here is a resident services program. So this is the Agency of Human Services shall work in coordination with VHCB to develop the resident services program for the purposes of distributing funds to eligible affordable housing organizations to respond to timely and urgent resident needs and aid with housing retention. I was not with you at the time. I did not author this section, so I will be honest, I'm not sure what this program is, other than what I just read you on the page. It is a session law provision, so it did not go into the Green Book statute, so conceivably it's a one-time appropriation or a one-time program, but this may be one that you would like to have VHCB or the Agency of Human Services, if you so desire, to come in.
Well, we are going to hear from a number of people who might be able to elucidate that.
Yep. And then there's a definition of what an affordable housing organization is, but it doesn't necessarily, change what the charge is under the sub-A here. So. Okay, the next section is, so this was an amendment to 2023 action results number 47. Which I believe number 47 maybe. Yes, an act related to housing opportunities made for everyone. So this is a home ownership development program through VHFA. It's a specific program that was provided, my understanding, one-time funds to assist individuals here. There's a slight amendment that you all made to that program. And if you want, here in a second, when I wrap up, I can go grab that program and share it with you all. And we can talk about it. But that's what I meant by when I start reviewing this and I see this, okay, you've done something in 2023. It's just going down a rabbit hole to find, okay, it's a one-time program, where are the parameters around it, how much money was it given, etc. So, okay. The next section, you all appropriated $1 million to the Department of Housing and Community Development for VHFA for the first generation home buyer program, which was initially conceived in 2022, Act 182. You all appropriated $1 million to the Land Access and Opportunity Board through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Then we have an amendment to 24 VSA 4010. This is for housing authorities, and it requires that when managing accessible units, when renting or leasing accessible dwelling units, those entities shall give priority to tenants with disability. Then I'm going to keep going. Here's where section 93, you all tasked the Department of Housing and Community Development with coming up with statewide and regional housing targets, progress towards those targets, and then requiring DHCD to report back to you on the the efforts made of achieving those targets, whether they're, kind of sustainable, if they're not on track to meet those targets, why are the targets not practical, et cetera. I mean, there's kind of a lot of detail here in what we've asked DHC to provide, but this is where it stems from, is this section.
Is there anything, question for you? Is there anything in Act 181, which is two sessions back, that requires regional planning commissions to disaggregate those housing goals by town? I mean, I know they're doing it, but I just don't know if it was in 181.
I do not recall that. Let me back up. No, I don't recall. I don't know. That may be a question for Ellen. She may know the
Is
answer.
Ellen coming?
Yeah.
30. Okay, great.
Okay. So again, you have, as part of the statewide housing needs assessment, DHCD creating these statewide and regional housing targets, and then providing information back to you all on, as I mentioned, ongoing progress towards meeting those targets. Then here, we're on page 49, section 94 and 95. We have a few appropriations. You provided at the time $400,000 to the Office of Economic Opportunity, to grant to Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity for a rental housing stabilization services program, which was initially created in 2023. And then you have a tenant representation pilot program, $1 million appropriated to Agency of Human Services to grant to Vermont Legal Aid for a tenant representation pilot program. That's a program where legal aid can represent individuals who, or I should say tenants, who are facing eviction in, I believe it's Lamoille. It's limited to 2 counties. I believe it's Lamoille and Washington counties. And so that is an ongoing pilot. They received the pilot program passed in 2023. They didn't receive funds for it. They received funds in fiscal year 2025. So they're in the middle of a 2-year pilot for that program.
Also, there is a bill that will come to us if it isn't ready. I don't think it's on our wall yet to about that program, appropriate more money. I don't think it has money in it yet, but it would extend it statewide. It's not that legal aid can't represent people statewide, but that bill provides funding for them to do that, a specific line of funding for those 2 counties and only those 2.
You also appropriated $2.5 million to the Vermont State Housing Authority for their rent arrears assistance fund, which was established in 2023, which provides support for individuals who are obviously in arrears for their rental payments. Then we get into landlord certificate. So again, prior to my time with you all, so I haven't gone back and listened to the testimony or anything to that effect. But what I recall from last year, there's been discussion about creating rental registries statewide and how do you get access to that information. And my understanding is you all determined as a body that possibly using the information that's collected as part of the landlord certificate was maybe a more feasible way of getting to that information.
Last year, yes.
Well, so you all made this change in 2024. And then last year you cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I'll get to, I'll just wait. We can talk a little bit more about it with what you did last year. But this is initially what was passed, which added all of these fields into the landlord certificate, which you all then cleaned up last year and kind of narrowed down a little bit. But this is where it all stems from, is initially in 2024. So that's what all these sections are. You have the changes to the landlord certificate, then you have where there was some amendments to confidentiality of tax records because landlord certificate is part of somebody's tax record. And so that's where all of those sections kind of stem from. Then here, page 154, moving into kind of section 100 and beyond, you have changes to short-term rentals. And this is where you've added a definition of short-term rental in Title 20. because you then subsequently gave the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire Safety, the authority to provide guidance and rules governing health, safety, sanitation, and fitness for habitation for short-term rentals. So you put the regulation of those entities under the Division of Fire Safety. Then we're moving into flood risk disclosure. The next few sections are really related to the disclosure of information regarding the sale of real estate and when somebody is renting either through a house or an apartment complex or through a manufactured home in a manufactured home park. Training myself. You all put these disclosure requirements in when those locations are within certain FEMA flood zones to disclose to the buyer of the property or to the renter that the property is located in a flood hazard area. If you all remember, you made some minor tweaks to this last year. And so we could talk about that, I assume, at a separate time if you'd like, but this is where all of those disclosures are. So I'm not going through these section by section unless you all have questions or want me to stop, but all of these are related to, as I mentioned, both sale, rental, manufactured home parks, etc. Okay, then we get to what's listed on the page as mobile homes. You have amendments to the manufactured home improvement and repair program. So as you can see here, Section 106, this program goes all the way back to 2022. It was amended in 2023, further amended in 2023, now further amended again in 2024. Last year, if you all recall, Act 69, you made this a permanent program and we put it right next to the VHIP program in statute. So there wasn't really a lot of substantive change last year in the language of the program. And I don't know that there's really been a ton of, significant changes in the program language over the years. It's really just been minor tweaks, but you all kept amending.
This program, remind us, what's it do?
It essentially, it's providing money, if I recall, and pull up the specific languages here. I'll wait till I get to Act 69 actually, because will be what you put in statute. But my recollection is the language is money can go to an individual who owns a manufactured home to help address habitability issues within the home. But it can also go to an individual or entity that owns a manufactured home park to either, remove a mobile home that may have been abandoned or, is unfit for dwelling, to also prepare specific manufactured home sites, whether it's fixing a slab, putting in a slab, addressing, utility hookups, et cetera, to try to make those homes available for living.
Right, and it's not an income tax. It applies to anyone in any mobile home community.
Right.
Manufactured home community. We gotta get in the habit of doing it.
Okay, next section, you all appropriated money, $1 million appropriated from the general funds for this purpose. Moving in on page 161 here, and I'm at 130, so I might try to speed up just a hair. You have sections related to age-restricted housing. So in these next few sections, what you all added here, I'm just going to kind of point to this language here under B. You created a right of first refusal for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board to have the right of first refusal when age-restricted housing goes up for sale. Mr. Chair, you have a question?
Can
Please,
you
thank
just
you.
go back to the program appropriations,
Yes, ma'am.
infrastructure, mobile home repair, the sum of 1 million?
Mhm.
Wasn't that last year 2 million?
I will double check while we're sitting here. I don't remember what you all appropriated. I know you appropriated funds for it last year, I believe.
I think it was 2 million, it was 4 million the time before.
In this bill, it was 1 million in 2024.
Okay,
But it was,
I thought it was 4 million.
but well, it started in 2022. It was amended again in 2023. We can check on the funding history.
I can get you a breakdown each year.
Yes.
What is age restricted housing? I
Is
don't
that senior
remember.
housing or is that only young people allowed?
It's,
It
I don't
is,
remember anything about this.
55.
Do you remember, Brett?
there are, there's housing that exists
Do you remember?
for individuals over a certain age.
Yeah, I know this bill was 2 years ago, but it's over a certain age.
I think
Yes.
it's over 55.
55.
Oh,
I think there's some for over 55 and I think there's some for over, I think it might be 62.
No, the 55.
There's no young age restriction.
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you know whether that's in policy or in practice?
For age restricted over a certain age or?
The restriction, is the restriction in policy or in practice?
Here's what I know. I know that you have certain entities that operate housing for individuals over a certain age. And I know in statute, in Vermont law, for example, it's not. Remember when we all discussed public accommodations and the unfair housing practices section? You all have amended that a few times over the past few
Yeah.
years. Last year, we added citizenship, immigration status into those. So there are specific exclusions in the unfair housing practices section, for example, to say that if you're operating, housing that's age restricted for individuals over 55, or I believe it also says over 62, that's not considered discrimination. So you all, as a body, have determined that, it's policy or, it's good policy to ensure that there's housing available for those individuals. And so you're saying that it's not discrimination to limit housing for those populations of people. So by implication, for me, if I'm reading that, if I were to say have housing, but it's only available for people in their 20s, that potentially could be considered discrimination.
But the law does, the definition according to our statute does not name an age, is that right?
This
The age is the practice.
right.
versus the
What I would
policy.
want to do is as soon as maybe Ellen takes the chair, I'm gonna pull up Title 33, Chapter 72 and 8, Chapter 151. We'll see exactly what those are.
Thank you.
So again, this section you gave DHCD right of first refusal for those properties when they come up for sale. And this section is long. It requires specific notice periods. It requires a specific time frame in which the individual who's selling the property has to allow DHCD to provide offer, what's a good faith offer, etc. There was a provision that you all put in here in the residential rental agreements chapter regarding notice for rent increases for age restricted housing. And then you have a few reports at the end. So you have the land bank report that you all got last year. You felt that there wasn't enough information there, so you asked DHCD to come back to you with some more information in Act 69. You have a rent payment reporting report. This was from the Office of the State Treasurer, where they came back with a report on how to implement what they call a positive rental payment reporting pilot program. So it would be taking rent payments that tenants are making and reporting that information as part of the individual's credit report.
They did, just so everybody knows, they did come back with the report. We put it in our housing bill last year, which went over to the Senate. The Senate bill that came to us, I don't know if it had it or not, but somehow in the last minute scramble, it got lost.
It also, the treasurer's office was asking $100,000.
$100,000. Yeah, right, yeah.
And I think the 100,000 was removed, and at that point, I think they were asking if the post be removed as well. You have the landlord tenant law study committee, which Two of your members,
Yes.
were participants on, and I believe you all got a debrief on that from John Gray at the beginning of last session. Very well put together report. To review it, happy to come back and talk about it in detail, if may be appropriate. Depending on how you all
I
decide.
think your time will come, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then there was an appropriation to the Natural Resources Board, and that's that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna very quickly just pull up Act 69 and go through it with you all for what you did last year. And then I have a few things I will look at while I'm sitting in the room when Ellen takes over. And as I mentioned, what I will do separate from this is I'll get you all a list of some of those one-time appropriations that were made prior to 2024, some of those other programs. Okay. Act 69, first section, VHIP. There were a lot of administrative amendments that were made to this section. Like, for example, this one, you made it to where, DHCD is granting funds through other, third-party entities, also potentially nonprofits. And so we're saying that when they're providing those reimbursement loans out to individuals, they're not considered licensed lenders. So a lot of administrative changes to the program like that throughout. But the big things that you all did in this were you expanded the populations of individuals who could be served again. I mentioned we expanded it in 2024. You expanded it again last year to include individuals who were displaced due to a natural disaster or to entities that hold a master lease for any of these populations that are already mentioned, individuals exiting homelessness, immigration, refugee resettlement, individuals with a disability, etc. And then the other big thing that you all did is, you remember in 2024, you made it where whether you're doing a 5-year forgivable loan or grant, or you're doing a 10-year forgivable loan, the landlord was required to rent that property to somebody who was within these populations. And the argument was, well, then why is anybody going to go for the 10-year loan? We're always just going to go for the 5-year loan because the restriction will be lifted sooner. So it was changed to say.
But this was in Act 69, yeah.
Yes, sir. And this change that you all did last year was actually to go back to what it was before the change in 2024, which is if you're going to do the 10-year loan, you have to rent the unit out for fair market rent established by HUD.
HUD fair market rent, by the way, is generally on the low end of fair market rent. It's not as low as many subsidized projects, but it's not. It's at the low end of fair market rent.
Two other things you all did, you created the minimum set aside. Because you made that change, you said at least 30% of the funds have to be set aside annually for the 5-year forgivable loans or grants. And then if those funds aren't used up within 9 months, they can then become eligible for the 10 years as well. And then the other thing you did was you created some annual reporting from the department to provide information to you all on the number of units that are funded, the number of units rehabilitated through each of those different avenues. And then for the properties that are coming up on the expiration of those lease limitations, what happens to the unit afterwards. I will highlight, I noticed this after the end of session, maybe a piece of cleanup you all want, maybe not. I didn't draft it, you all didn't include what date that report should fall on. So it just says annually they have to give you a report. If you want it at a specific time, it may be worth it to go in and specify. You have the Manufactured Home Improvement and Repair Program. As we mentioned, it had been in session law and kept getting amended and amended every year. So last year you all put it in statute. Section 3, you created the Vermont Infrastructure Sustainability Fund. This is the fund with the bond bank to provide funding to municipalities essentially tied to the development of new housing. It was a revolving fund. You have the section 4 is on page 12. The VHFA rental housing revolving loan program. So this is one of the programs that was created in 2023, which created a rental housing revolving loan fund. And it is to provide here, this is where I'm looking at right here, provide subsidized loans for rental housing developments that serve middle income households. So there are specific parameters throughout this section about what the loans are for, you know, how much can be financed for each project, et cetera, et cetera. If you all remember, there is a cap, or there was a cap on the annual increase in rent. So it's right here at the bottom of page 12, top of page 13. The developments that are created using that fund, the annual rent caps could only go up by 3%. And VHFA was saying that is becoming very challenging in the current, you know, environment that we're in. So you added this, or an amount otherwise authorized by the agency. You have the State Housing and Residential Services Planning Committee report. If you all remember, this was a committee that was created to specifically create an actionable plan to develop housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. So that committee met. They did release a report at the end of 2025. So I'll point that to you all to go find and read if you would so choose. I believe that you all had been coming in to discuss that as well, I think this week. Okay, so then we get to the tax department housing data access piece. So this is, if you all remember, kind of part and parcel of the landlord certificate piece that we were discussing from 2024. This requires the municipalities to give to the tax department an extract of the assessor database, also referred to as the CAMA system, for each town. And then you made some amendments to the landlord certificate that we just kind of discussed. It took a lot of the, I can't say a lot, it took some of the information that you all were requesting out of the landlord certificate and replaced it with this information here. So there were just some minor tweaks to what you all were requiring them to provide. This is the land bank report that we talked about. DHCD coming back to you November of this year with, you know, kind of further developing the land bank report that they created and providing you all with specific legislative language on how to create regional or statewide land banks.
That was due this year?
This year, meaning 2026.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. We haven't gotten
On the
that yet.
They're giving you a written update on January 15th.
Okay,
But the final report is due in, I believe it's November of 26. Yes. Okay, housing and public accommodations protection, we just mentioned this, you know, a second ago. We're getting into where you all added citizenship and immigration status into public accommodation protection and unfair housing practices protection. In the committee report, committee of conference, they also included this, which was in some way part of what you all had passed and you know, slightly different in the Senate version. But in the residential rental applications section, it says that in order to conduct a background and credit check, a landlord shall accept any of the following: an original or copy of an unexpired form of government issued identification, individual taxpayer identification number or social security number, and the landlord or landlord's agent shall not require a social security number for the completion of the application or refuse to accept the application due to a lack of one. Move through these sections here. We get to page 26, LURB study. You all moved up the date for the LURB study report that was initially due January 15th. You moved it up January 15th of 2026. You moved it up to November 15th of 2025.
it was in fact submitted, although a week later, so, but it was submitted.
Yep. And then for brownfields, you made some tweaks here. You wanted to prioritize the development of, brownfield cleanup for residential areas. You asked for a report on how to improve the process for cleanup of brownfields. Let's see. So this is the priority section. Secretary prioritize review of remediation for a site that contains housing or planned construction. Here's the process improvement report. And then you get into tax increment financing, which is where you all created the community and housing infrastructure program. I believe you all are having a joint hearing on that this week on Friday, so those are not my sections.
While we're still there, do we know, Miriam, is it 3 committees or 2?
There'll be 3, it'll be ways and means commerce.
So it's 3 committees. We'll be hearing that. So we'll be stacked up in room 11.
Yeah, all our buddies.
And then you all made technical changes to the smoke and carbon monoxide alarm section. That is it for Act 69.
Thank you.
So like I said, what I will do is I'll go back, I'll make a list for you all, some of those other programs that didn't exist in the past 2 years and get that to you all.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
Our next witness is Ellen Tchaikovsky from Ledge Council, who's going to talk to us about, if I'm right, the Home Act as it relates to housing and the parts of Act 181, the arcane parts of 181 that deal with the tiers and how they relate to housing. Is that fair?
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things I'm just saying to the committee, one of the things that, and the public, one of the things that we have to work with here is that almost everything that we will do to improve the housing situation either implicates another committee of the House or is within the jurisdiction of another committee of the House. And this is something we're just working our way through, but they include, of course, ways and means for money. They include environment for Act 181 for for land use and regulatory stuff in Act 250, as well as of course and economic development next door for CHIP and tax increment work as well. Housing, human services has everything to do with homelessness. And in fact, just for your information, not as part of these hearings, but we've asked Representative Wood, Teresa Wood, the chair, to come in and just talk to us for an hour about homeless. I just think it's important what we're trying to do is break down, if you will, the barriers a little bit. And one way to do that is with knowledge. And that's one of the reasons Ellen's here to talk to us about 2 acts, which really never came before this committee. I don't think, but are nonetheless really important for us. Ellen, take it away.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. Yes, that's a good segue. I was going to remind you that while I am not technically the housing attorney with the Office of Legislative Counsel, in the last few years, especially, the areas of law that I work on have been implicated in your work on housing. And so I work on land use, which includes municipal zoning and Act 250, among a couple other things. And so what I have provided to the committee today is the text of Act 47 of 2023, which was also called the Home Act. And I've also provided the summary. And then I did the same for Act 181 because I have only a window of time, and Act 181 was 171 pages and Act 47 was 76 pages. And so both of those bills focus largely on housing. So there's quite a few things, and Cameron hit on a few of them, but I'm going to do my best because there's quite a few things related to municipal zoning and Act 250 changes related to housing. So I don't have my laptop. So I was just gonna try to run through the bullet points, and then if there's something you want to focus on, we can find it in the act. Or we can also have, I wanted to balance because I know you have another witness after this, so there's gonna be a lot of information. So starting with Act 47, this was called the Housing Opportunities Made for Everyone, or the Home Act. This is in 2023. And in the summary, the first 2.5 pages are things that I worked on related to housing. So this had a lot of changes to zoning related to housing, and largely was encouraging things other than single-family residential units, and encouraging density. So first, in residential districts with sewer and water, a municipality cannot require more than one parking space per dwelling unit. They can require 1.5 parking spaces for multi-unit dwellings in areas without sewer and water, if there isn't other parking within a quarter of a mile. So parking was the first big change. That also comes up in Act 181. So limiting how much the municipality themselves can require, developers are therefore allowed to do more if they would like to include more, but some towns were requiring quite a few parking spaces, either based on bedroom or based on the house size. So this limited parking to allow for potentially more units to fit in a smaller area. Another, a big change was municipalities must allow duplexes, or single-family units are allowed. And municipalities must permit multi-unit dwellings with up to 4 units in areas of the town served by sewer and water, unless the town requires more units to be built. So this didn't fully end single-family zoning, but it was a significant blow to the concept of whole swaths of a municipality being only allowed to have single-family units. Now the town is required to allow more types of units. It requires towns to subject accessory dwelling units to the same standards of review that a single-family home goes through. So they couldn't use stricter criteria for ADUs. Municipal zoning cannot prohibit motels or hotels renting to those using housing assistance funds. So can't interfere with some of the programs that the legislature established with using assistance funds in hotel rooms. In residential districts served by sewer and water, bylaws shall establish building and lot standards to allow 5 or more units per acre. And no dimensional standard for multi-unit dwellings can be more restrictive than those for single-family dwellings. So trying to require towns to allow more units per acre and not requiring different standards for those types of units than for single-family homes.
This is where the 5 units or more.
This is in residential districts served by sewer and water.
So is there, I'm not sure I fully understand. So if a district in a town is served by sewer and water, one, in any area that's residential, they have to allow up to 4 units per acre.
5 units per acre.
5.
Yep.
They have to allow up to 5 units per acre.
Yes.
And
separately, they have to, if there's sewer and water, they also have to allow multi-unit dwellings with up to 4 units in them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
It's a very specific question.
Okay.
So a town cannot restrict if it's 5 or less. But a neighbor can appeal,
yes,
Appeal what?
let's say the character.
So that comes up a little bit later. In certain areas, they can no longer appeal character. Yes. So depending on the situation, a neighbor could attempt to appeal a permit application for a multi-unit building. But if it complies with they couldn't challenge it if the building lines up with what the bylaw allows. They may try to challenge it based on something else, like character or something, but another provision of this bill also talks about whether or not the municipality can change how many units are in the building. So yes, if the application complies with what is allowed in the statute, an opponent may not be able to appeal, or they could try to appeal and then would lose.
But it would still have to go to court if they
Yes.
appeal.
Yes.
If they have standing, it would have to go to court. If it's consistent with the zoning and the state law that she is summarizing, they would have to find another basis for the appeal, such as character or something else.
Okay.
And procedurally, someone could attempt to file and have the suit dismissed on summary judgment, or there could be procedural motions to prevent it from even going forward if it's in compliance with the bylaw. So getting to that procedure is a little complicated, but we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It's an opportunity.
I like those. So if you're looking at the summary, I'm down on the 6th bullet point. In residential districts served by sewer and water, affordable housing units may add up to an additional units up to 40% of the density. So this is a density bonus. If you're building affordable housing in these areas, you can add an additional up to 40%. And that can include an additional floor.
Or anything else.
And then I do keep referring to sewer and water. There's a process established in here for municipalities on how to particularly define that per municipality. And it's come up a few times because the definition is quite long and addresses the many different variations towns have. But they are allowed to either rely on in part what it says in the statute or define further in their own bylaws what it means in that town as served by sewer and water.
Is the density bonus above and beyond the 4 units?
Yes, or whatever the town has established.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep. Next, there is a provision that establishes that towns are limited in what aspects of a homeless shelter they can regulate through zoning. And that includes that the bylaws can't limit their daily and seasonal hours of operation. Can you repeat that, please? Sure. So there's a provision that limits what aspects of a homeless shelter a town can regulate through their zoning. One of those limits is that they can't regulate daily and seasonal hours of operation. And I can read you the rest of the list, or I could give you the site if you want to look at the list, but there's a list of things that the town can only regulate for those structures. They can't go through their full zoning review for them. Thank you. Yeah. Next, there was a requirement that town had to give specific information to the Department of Housing and Community Development when they adopted new zoning bylaws or updated their bylaws. So that the department could then update their database and build a database of what the existing zoning bylaws were, are and currently are in other towns. Next, so under one of the appeal provisions for municipal zoning, it prohibited the ability of appealing the character of the area if it was an affordable housing development. And specifically, if it was any 10 persons or now any 20 persons, that specific group cannot appeal character of the area if it's an affordable housing development.
Is it either the 20-person rule for any development or any housing development, any affordable housing development? Or is it, but in other words,
If they're using the any 20-person provision to appeal,
yeah,
that group of people cannot appeal the character of appeal an affordable housing project based on its character of the area.
okay, so it's both. In other words,
Yes.
just to be clear, if the appeal comes from someone who claims that they are an individual that is claiming under that other section that's sort of like aggrieved,
Yes,
they're not limited.
correct.
It's the 20-person, 10-person then, now 20-person rule.
Yes, there is an additional limitation that residential units in one of the designated areas cannot be appealed for the character of the area as well.
Residential unit in what designated area?
So I don't have it in front of me. I believe it's any one of the 5.
Yeah.
But I'll give it to, it's in one of these things I'm probably going to show you. So
These
it's
are pre-existing.
pre-existing limitations on the use of character of the area as an appeal tool.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Oh, it might be on page 2, actually, so maybe we'll get to that in a minute. So on to page 2 of the summary. This act allowed towns to give their administrative officer authority to approve minor subdivisions and decide if a hearing was required for a minor subdivision. So in municipal zoning, you have the zoning administrator, and then you also have the panel. So
The DRB.
yes, it's the DRB or whichever structure a town uses. The zoning administrator is basically the quickest way because it's basically them just signing off on the permit. And so this is allowing towns to define what is a minor subdivision because it doesn't specify. But for them, what is a minor subdivision? And then the administrative officer can just issue that, and that's a significantly quicker process. So then the second bullet point on page 2 says that this act also clarified existing law that the character of the area cannot be appealed in decisions for certain type of housing. But other elements of the decision may be appealed. So you did work in this bill in Act 47 to clarify what exactly, which types of housing character of the area could not be appealed from. And so it's for residential development in a designated downtown, growth center, or neighborhood development area. If this is there cannot be an appeal of a residential development in one of those areas based on the character of the area. Okay, next, it also established this concept of by right zoning, which meant that when an appropriate municipal panel, the DRB, or some towns have it structured differently, but the panel that reviews zoning permits, they have to provide justifications if they're seeking to adjust any dimensional requirements in a housing permit. So the statute lays out that if an application for housing meets the standard established in the zoning bylaw, the town cannot require fewer units or fewer a smaller lot coverage unless they can justify why that is necessary. So either requires the town to approve the permit or provide a justification for why that is not going to work. So attempting to allow the developers to get the development they are seeking to build.
So, for example, most zones, not all, but most zones, like in my town, even the 3-acre zone, has setbacks. You know, front setbacks, rear setbacks, sometimes side setbacks. So a town can't increase those setbacks for a specific development unless they have a justification for it.
Right. Right, and one of the examples for justification is a national or state, a federal, state, or other town limitation, like if there's a wetland on the property and you need to shrink the size of the development because there's an outstanding other law that would require that. So that's what an example would be. All right, so still on page 2, requires additional detail in the housing element of both the regional plans and the municipal plans. This is just to help get more data and get more specificity around the housing targets and what the total housing investments may be needed for those areas. It removed the ability of rural towns to require changes to bylaws be adopted by the Australian ballot. There was a distinction created in the statute between rural towns and urban, non-rural towns. This gets rid of that. Any town can still choose to use it, but it eliminates that distinction between rural towns. And then it allows the Department of Housing and Community Development to use up to 20% of the municipal planning funds for administration of the planning grant program.
Can you just back up for a second to the rural towns may not change their zoning
Sure.
based on Australian ballot? Does that mean that at town meeting, you could have a voice vote, just not Australian ballot?
I'm having a hard time remembering off the top of my head. It was removing a very small distinction between rural towns and non-rural towns. So let's see if I can find it quickly. Okay, so I think this is in 24 VSA 4442. So this is on routine adoption of bylaws. So a routine adoption of a bylaw amendment, or repeal shall be adopted by a majority of the members of the legislative body at a meeting held after the final meeting, and shall be effective 21 days after the adoption, unless by action of the legislative body, it is warned for a vote by the municipality by Australian ballot at a special or regular meeting. So
Did you just say unless warned by us?
yes,
So it allows the use of Australian ballot.
yes. The legislative body, so the city council or the select board can make that decision that they want to put it to the full public, but they have to make that decision. It struck the difference because there was further language that allowed that a rural town may elect to require that the bylaws, amendments, or repeals shall be adopted by Australian ballot.
I'm getting really confused.
I know, because I can't remember exactly why we made this change. I just remember that it was, I can get back to you, because I think it was an odd distinction between something for only rural towns as opposed to for any town. So,
Yeah, if you could, I really would appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. 44, 42. All right, we'll get back to that. So that's the end of the municipal zoning changes in Act 47. Then there were a few Act 250 changes. So, and then a few of the changes that were made in Act 47 are then changed by Act 181, which is where a lot of the big Act 250 changes happened. So the first bullet point under Act 250 on page 2 is that it changed the jurisdictional threshold for housing units within designated areas. And I'm going to skip over this one because it was then, this was repealed by Act 180.
Actually, I was gonna say,
Okay,
we've only, I think we have a 2:30.
Yeah.
We have Mike Picha coming at 2:30. I'd like to allow 7-8 minutes for a break.
Okay.
So we've got essentially 10 more minutes. So you might think about, I encourage you to think about going to 181 unless there's something special in the Home Act that has survived.
no. There was a few different things changed that were then adjusted in Act 181, I think, for Act 250, other than there was this provision added to Act 250 about towns could use master plans, which is another faster way for Act 250 permits to get issued. Don't know if that is any longer being used. The other changes in Act 250 that happened in Act 181 are sort of swallowed out.
What the heck?
And so turning to Act 181, 2024, a lot of things changed in Act 181, not all of them specifically related to housing, but the Act 250 system is overall going through a lot of different changes. The administration system of Act 250, the board changed. It went from the Natural Resources Board to the Land Use Review Board. That board has become permanent. permanently staffed, so it has 5 full-time members who are overseeing the Act 250 process and working on a lot of the other work you gave them in Act 181. So some of the things that related to housing. Act 181 created a new jurisdictional system for Act 250. So Act 250, the state land use and development law created in 1970. It set jurisdictional triggers for what needed a permit. It was broadly large construction based on the project type and the size of the parcel. So it lists in the statute the type of project it was going to be: residential, commercial, industrial, governmental, and then based on the size of the project, that would determine what kind, whether or not a permit would be needed. Act 181 changed that dramatically to say the location of the project and the physical elements are also relevant to the determination of whether something needs a permit. So on one end of the spectrum, we have tier 1, broken into tier 1A and tier 1B. Those are the settled areas, the compact settlements that are the centers, your downtown centers, your village centers. Those areas identified as where development should be encouraged and where development has already happened. And so less Act 250 oversight is needed there because the towns themselves are doing oversight of the building and construction that happens. So Act 250 jurisdiction is going to be removed from those areas once the system is in place because the municipal zoning system is going to take over fully. On the opposite end of the spectrum is tier 3. Those are the critical natural resource areas. Those are areas where any construction will trigger the need for an Act 250 permit. Those are still being defined by the board, but tier 1 and tier 3 are actually going to be a fairly probably small portion of the state. The rest of it is going to be tier 2. And in tier 2, very little is changing as to how whether a permit is needed. It's going to be largely the system that's been in place for the last 50 years, with the exception of the road pool. So the new thing there is that in tier 2, the construction of a private road greater than 800 feet or multiple private roads or driveway greater than 2,000 feet will trigger the need for an Act 250 permit. Previously, it was mostly only buildings that triggered Act 250 or other different types of commercial operations. So as part of this jurisdictional system, all of the regional planning commission regional plans and their maps are being updated to use consistent terms across the entire state. Those will then also feed into the town maps, and both the town and regional maps will identify what areas are going to be tier 1 and which areas are going to be tier 3, so that everyone is on the same page and that this creates a whole statewide map so that people then know where these areas are and what their jurisdiction opportunity under Act 250 will be. So it's specifically related to housing, in tier 1A, once those areas are delineated, any construction within them will be exempt from Act 250. They will still have to go through the municipal zoning process. For tier 1B, up to 49 units of housing will be exempt from Act 250 per project. And they will also be covered then by the municipal zoning permit. While all this is going on and determining these areas, you created a number of temporary Act 250 exemptions related to housing. So these are in section 31 of Act 181. So there were exemptions created for hotels or motels that are being converted into affordable housing. They're exempt from Act 250. There's also an exemption for accessory dwelling unit construction and then converting a commercial structure into housing with 29 or fewer units. That's until July 1, 2028. Additionally, until January 1, 2027, there's an exemption for 75 units of housing or fewer in new town centers, growth centers, and neighborhood development areas. if they have zoning, water, sewer, or appropriate soils. Exemption of 50 units or fewer within 1/4 mile around village centers that have zoning and subdivision bylaws, sewer, water, or appropriate soils. Or 50 units of housing in urbanized areas along a transit route. And then an exemption for all housing within downtowns that have permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws, sewer, water, and appropriate soils.
Yes,
Would you be able to create a document that has all the exemptions made in Act 181 specifically and what their sunset date is?
I was just thinking that.
Sure, I mean, I think whatever page I'm on has them. So
What page are you on?
I'm on page 4 of the summary document.
Yeah, that would be.
so
Good to
just
have.
to highlight something for the committee,
What?
these exemptions apply for areas that have water or sewer or quote appropriate soils, end quote. Appropriate soils means soils that would allow the necessary septic system to go.
Yes. And sorry, yes, the statute does say more about that. The summary is shorter.
Yeah,
Yes.
So we're going off specifically the summary document and, okay.
yeah, we're about out of time. Is there
Okay.
something you'd like to highlight in the
I think-
remaining 2 minutes?
I think that there is actually another exemption. I think there might be one other exemption that I missed for housing. Yes. Sorry, it's at the bottom of page 3. There is another exemption. So in Act 47, you did establish an exemption for priority housing projects. So prior to these 2 acts, there was this concept of priority housing projects. These are housing projects that are located in the designated areas and that have at least 20% of the units are affordable as defined in the statute for at least 15 years. And there was a cap on the number of units that could be exempt based on the population size of the municipality. What happened in Act 47 and then was extended further in 181 was that the cap on the number of units of priority housing projects was removed. So currently, there is no cap on the number of priority housing projects that can be built that are exempt from Act 250 if they're located in a downtown, a neighborhood development area, or a growth center. It also extends that area to a 1/2 mile around the designated center if they have to have permanent zoning, subdivision bylaws, and sewer, water, appropriate soils.
Didn't it also eliminate the 20% requirement?
No.
And was that or and? Downtown growth and growth center or downtown or growth center?
And,
Or
or is
okay.
it or?
And in some situations, they actually might be the same area, but.
Right.
So these are all exemptions from Act 250. They're
Yes,
not exemptions from any of the zoning, local zone.
right.
Okay. I mean, so in the Home Act, there's a lot of requirements that what local zoning has to do to increase density. And in Act 181, there are exemptions from Act 250.
So Act 181 also does have a series of municipal zoning changes. They're not as many as 181, but they are also municipal zoning changes as well.
Well, I think what we'd like to do, thank you so much, Ellen. I really appreciate your coming and providing this succinct summary to the committee.
Yeah.
And I'd say welcome back, but you've been here all along.
I'm always here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we look forward to having you here more. Great, she said. Let's take a break, everyone, and come back just before 2:30 when our next witness will be Mike Petek.